Donald Trump has been seriously indicted, along with 18 other people, 19 altogether, along with, in particular, I mean, the high-profile people, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, who, by the way, was not indicted. I mean, actually, none of these people were indicted in the federal Jack Smith indictment. We're still waiting for the other shoe to drop on that, and I'm fully expecting a shoe drop there, as it were. But, at the moment, these people are now officially indicted down in Georgia. Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell, John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark, and a bunch of people whose names you're probably not familiar with. I'll fill you in on who they are and what they're all about in a little bit here. But this is consequential in a huge way. First of all, most of these people either lied to or refused to participate with the Georgia grand jury, and apparently, which is why they've been indicted. There's a whole bunch of people, obviously, who did cooperate with the Georgia grand jury. For example, many of the Georgia fake electors are not mentioned in this indictment because they did cooperate. And this indictment this is the fourth one, the fourth indictment against Donald Trump. The first was for his business dealings, paying off porn stars and then that sort of thing in New York State, in New York City, actually. That was Alvin Bragg's. Well, you've got Letitia James also. That's a civil case. You've got Alvin Bragg with a criminal case. You've got down in Florida, the case that's before Judge Cannon, which is the violations of the Espionage Act, keeping documents, top secret documents, and sharing them with people that he was not authorized to share them with. And I would add to that list, in all probability, in my opinion, is sharing those documents with the Saudis and the Russians. But that's kind of a digression. And then there's this case in Georgia. Now, what's unique about this Georgia RICO case is it's the only one of the 4 indictments that has minimum mandatory sentences. All 19 people who are charged under this RICO case by Fani Willis, the district attorney for Fulton County in Georgia, all 19 of them are charged with racketeering. That's a 5-year minimum mandatory sentence in Georgia. None of them have been charged in any other venue, to the best of my knowledge, and none of them have been charged, and even if they are charged, odds are it won't be with minimum mandatories like this. So these people now have, first of all, they have until Friday to show up in Georgia and say, yeah, I'm here, this is, I plead not guilty or whatever it may be. Number one, they have until Friday to do that. But secondly, they all have a strong incentive now to flip, to become witnesses for the prosecution rather than become defendants, or rather than remain defendants. Fani Willis last night said, one of the reporters asked her, are you going to try to prosecute all 19 people at once? And she said yes. And after that, all the talking heads on TV were like, holy cow, what do you mean? And how could it be? And does she really? And 19 people? That's a mess. And well, she doesn't expect there to be 19 people there. This is not her first rodeo. This is the 12th time that she has made a RICO indictment. She did a RICO indictment against a drug gang. She's got a RICO indictment going against a rapper's record label. She did a RICO indictment against teachers in Georgia who were involved in a cheating scheme. They're in prison now. And in every one of those RICO cases, she started out indicting a whole pile of people, and she ended up putting just a small number of people in jail, because the whole point of a RICO prosecution is not to get the small fish in prison. It's to get the small fish to flip on the big fish, on the leader, on the guy who's running the racketeering organization, the corrupt organization, racketeering influenced corrupt organization, RICO. The whole point of these RICO laws is to take down the mob boss. They were originally put into place against the mafia. So my bet is that when Fani Willis finally goes into court, assuming that she does, and there's a huge caveat to this. Actually, there's 2 huge caveats to this. But my bet is that when Fani Willis finally gets into court, she's not going to have 19 defendants. She's going to have 1 or 3 or maybe 5. But I think most of these people are not going to try to fight this. They're going to, I mean, why would they? The only person that this crime would have benefited was Donald Trump. I mean, you could argue that if Trump had remained president, Rudy Giuliani might have been attorney general and there was some benefit to that, or Jenna Ellis might have gotten put on the Supreme Court and there was some benefit to her. But the direct benefit, none of these people had an immediate and direct benefit other than Donald Trump. And this is just like with a mob boss, with a mob organization. You got a bunch of guys who work for the mafia. Yeah, they've got a benefit in that they get a paycheck or they get a share of the crimes that get committed. So they've got some skin in the game, as it were. But the guy who really benefits the most is the mob boss. The head of the Gambino crime family. The guy was a multi-millionaire because he took a little piece of all these different criminal activities. Donald Trump, same deal. He's the principal beneficiary. So the goal of this prosecution is not to put 19 people in prison. It's to put Donald Trump in prison. And he's the only one, I'm guessing, that she will not accept a plea deal from. Now, it's possible she won't accept a plea deal from Rudy Giuliani or Jenna Ellis or John Cheesebro. Some of the people who were really central to this criminal enterprise. We'll have to see. But I would be amazed if there's more than 5 or 6 people ultimately in the courtroom when this thing finally goes to trial. So that said, here are the caveats before I get into all the details of the indictment and the people involved and everything else in that. Here are the caveats about Fani Willis actually prosecuting Donald Trump. Number one, the Georgia legislature passed a law which takes effect in 8 weeks that allows Governor Brian Kemp to remove any district attorney in the state of Georgia from her office, including Fani Willis. So he can just pull her out and replace her with a GOP toady. I mean, we've already seen this happening in other states. So, number one, 8 weeks down the road, it's not impossible that they might do this. I mean, this. By the way, you're saying, well, what about precedent? Won't people be outraged? In December of 1992, step into the Wayback Machine. November of 1992, Bill Clinton beat George Herbert Walker Bush in the election. December, George Bush, the elder, is still president, and his attorney general is Bill Barr. The special prosecutor in that case has brought indictments against 5 allies of George Herbert Walker Bush and Ronald Reagan for the whole Iran-Contra Watergate thing. Or not Watergate, the whole Iran-Contra thing, excuse me. George Bush the elder goes to his attorney general, Bill Barr, and says, how can I get out of this? Because they had just subpoenaed his personal diary. And if he turned that over, it would show, or he was concerned that it would show, that he played a role in Ronald Reagan's conspiracy with the Ayatollah Khomeini to hold the hostages in 1980 so he could beat Jimmy Carter. So George Bush is like, how do I get out of this, Bill Barr? And Bill Barr is like, we'll just pardon all the people who are charged right now. And they did. George Herbert Walker Bush on Christmas Eve, 1992, huge screaming headline across the front page of the New York Times saying, Walsh, who was the special prosecutor, claims cover up. That was the headline. Walsh claims cover up. And it shut down the investigation. Well, in this case, it wouldn't be pardoning Trump and everybody because, Joe Biden's not going to do that, and Brian Kemp doesn't have the authority to do that. Instead, you just decapitate the prosecutor. Same effect. And everybody was horrified for a week. And then Bill Clinton got inaugurated, on January 20th, 4 weeks later, and everybody forgot about it. So I think it's entirely possible that Brian Kemp 8 weeks from now, could remove Fani Willis and decapitate this prosecution. And everybody will, there'll be a lot of huffing and puffing for a month or two, and that'll be the end of that.